This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by the newly launched podcast Anslinger, The Untold Cannabis Conspiracy, a new project from producer Annie Rouse that dives into the story of Harry Anslinger, the founding father of the drug war who served as the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the agency that later became the DEA. Harry Anslinger spent decades wielding power first within the world of federal drug enforcement before retiring to turn his sights to the international realm. It's always a good thing to understand the reasons why things are the way they are, and in legal marijuana, Harry Anslinger is the guy who made prohibition possible. Arm yourself with some historical knowledge by opening up the excellent new podcast from Annie Rouse called Anslinger, The Untold Cannabis Conspiracy. We have a link to the podcast on our website and Twitter account, and you can just search iTunes for the term Anslinger. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Friday, February 9th, 2018, and you're tuned in to episode 428 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day starts us off in Washington State, where yesterday State Liquor and Cannabis Board Deputy Director Peter Antolin informed licensed medical marijuana operators via letter that an unauthorized intruder had accessed the state's Cannabis-Tracking program and downloaded a copy of the traceability database holding information about all of the ways that legal cannabis is moved throughout the commercial system. The hack took place on Saturday and is said to be the cause of a service outage seen by Washington cannabis businesses on Sunday and Monday. We've touched on that story a few times recently with Washington's seed-to-sale tracking vendor MJ Freeway catching a lot of heat over the last year or so for failures to hit launch deadlines and for falling prey to online attacks. Open up Leafly for all the details on this one. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker is making headlines today in his state for the pushback he gave yesterday to the quick progress the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission is making in implementing a full-throated adult use commercial program. Specifically, Governor Baker said that he's worried about plans by the commission to legalize marijuana delivery, as well as to allow businesses like cafes and yoga studios to let their customers consume cannabis on site. In response, Cannabis Control Commission Chair Stephen Hoffman said, quote, "We used our best judgment in terms of coming up with the number of categories of licensees that we're willing to consider, and it was always about trying to honor the will of the people in terms of accessibility, public safety, minimizing the illicit market, creating opportunities for minorities, women, and veterans, and allowing for the participation of disproportionately impacted communities," unquote. Hoffman went on to say that while they would include the governor's feedback as part of their deliberations, Baker's thoughts carried no more weight than any other person's. The commission will be finalizing their proposed plans next month for adult legalization, set to debut later this summer. Our final top story this fine Friday is some excellent news as Seattle, Washington joins in with cities like San Francisco, California in retroactively wiping clean the criminal records of people with past marijuana possession charges. The city's attorney's office will ask its municipal courts to vacate all misdemeanor marijuana possession charges from the years prior to 2012, when Washington voted to legalize adult use via ballot measure. This is fantastic news for everyone who will get their records cleaned up, but is also hugely valuable as an example for yet other cities to follow. The more places that do things like this, the easier it is for others to do the same. Let's keep cheering on this snowballing train of restorative justice. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, the new podcast Anslinger, The Untold Cannabis Conspiracy, by producer Annie Rouse. Annie is a member of our Century Club, those patron supporters giving at the $100 month level and higher, and is a Fulbright scholar who's been long researching the story of Harry Anslinger, founding father of Prohibition. Her new podcast is an episodic series that will publish a new episode every week for each of its 12-week seasons, of which there will be 6. That means there's a lot of great information and insight to come about the guy who started the drug war. If you're into drug policy topics and like a good storytelling podcast, then you'll love Anslinger, The Untold Cannabis Conspiracy by producer Annie Rouse. You can find a link to Annie's podcast on our website and Twitter account, or you can just search iTunes for the term Anslinger. All right, time for the Blitz. New cannabis ventures picked up first on the story of Alliance Once International, a tobacco processing and supply company acquiring 2 Canadian medical marijuana companies as well as a North Carolina CBD oil startup. Alliance Once has a market cap of just north of $115 million and is the first large tobacco company to invest in the legal marijuana industry. Pop open and read Alan Brockstein's piece for all the numbers and details. There are a number of proposed marijuana-related bills in the works within Hawaii's state legislature, and one of them would open up reciprocity for their medical marijuana program with other states. Lawmakers pushing the bill say that tourists in need of medical marijuana should be served by island dispensaries once they present the proper documentation showing their eligible status back home. We'll report back on this one as it progresses. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders sent an email to his numerous supporters earlier this week, asking them to sign a petition in support of adopting a more sane policy on drug use and abuse. Senator Sanders' email starts off by talking about the need to legalize marijuana before taking a broader scope and attacking the drug war at large. In closing, the good senator wrote, quote, "Sign my petition if you agree it is long past time for the government to end its failed war on drugs and instead invest in programs that focus on treatment and prevention of drug abuse. This is an important issue that impacts almost everyone, and we should all make our voices heard." Unquote. Open up Tom Angel's piece over at Marijuana Moment to read the full email yourself and to sign the petition. Last week, Washington, D.C. City Police raided a sports bar that was hosting an event for marijuana vendors to sell cannabis products to customers. The event was held in true D.C. gray market style, where customers would spend $50 to buy a cheap baseball card, which also happened to come with a free gift of marijuana. That nudge, wink, wink sham style of commerce is also seen in my home state of Maine and in neighboring Massachusetts, as police stop strictly enforcing marijuana laws in the transition time right before full-blown legalization lands. Well, as WAMU is reporting, last week's police raids in D.C. is not the first such action and is bringing a lot of attention to the whole commercial ecosystem that has sprung up around the idea of gifting as a means of selling. This issue won't be around for too long in the grand scheme of things, but not a bad one to have a handle on now. Mashable is reporting that California-based marijuana company MedMen had a good first month of operations at their Los Angeles dispensary, seeing 23,606 customers walk through their doors just in January. The shop's revenue was up 200% from December and 500% from January of last year. Sounds like a good business to be in. Rolling Stone takes a good longer-form look at the process of applying to use cannabis in scientific studies. Last month, the DEA announced plans to streamline the process scientists have to go through in order to study Schedule I drugs like marijuana, LSD, and ecstasy. But Rolling Stone is reporting that, shockingly, it's not really any easier now to jump through the myriad of hoops still in place for anyone hoping to throw some science on cannabis. Given the DEA's past record on not being stupid about marijuana, that makes sense. Another good one to read in full. And finally for today, Bruce Barcott over at Leafly has the story of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu putting the brakes on efforts within his country to start exporting medical cannabis commercially. According to media outlets in Israel, the halt of the program came about recently after a call between Netanyahu and President Donald Trump, who carved out some space from his TV and fast food time to express his opposition to legal marijuana. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again Monday morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines at mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, Anslinger, the Untold Cannabis Conspiracy Podcast, and to all of our awesome Patreon listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the Patreon listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in, starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.